And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's take the opportunity now to talk about health and health policy. If you were watching yesterday, you saw Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, get grilled on Capitol Hill as he was presenting his kind of wish list items for his agency's 2026 fiscal year budget here. Fox's Griff Jenkins has a look at that very appearance.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. facing off with lawmakers for the first time since his confirmation hearings over his planned overhaul of the agency. Senator Patty Murray accused the Trump administration of delaying critical cancer care for one of her constituents named Natalie.
Natalie is sitting there waiting for treatment.
I'm offering to help her, but you don't care. You don't care about Natalie.
Kennedy later told the committee his staff found the woman was medically ineligible for treatment in a National Institutes of Health trial. He also defended widespread cuts at HHS, saying they have not impacted key health programs.
I compliment Secretary Kennedy and the Trump administration for finally saying enough's enough. We're not going to keep funding frivolous and crazy research.
In front of House lawmakers, Kennedy was pressed over his view on vaccines, but appeared to soften his approach.
I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me.
At one point, his Senate hearing was interrupted when the co-founder of Ben & Jerry's ice cream had to be dragged out after joining protesters.
Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be permitted.
Capitol Police tell Fox Ben Cohen was arrested on obstruction charges, but a spokesperson for Cohen issued a statement saying he won't, quote, look away from what he deems an injustice in Gaza. In Washington, Griff Jenkins, Fox News.
Griff, thanks so much. So yes, that was quite a disruptive hearing on the Hill just yesterday. Back out live there to Washington. We want to go now, though, from the nation's capital to the Sunshine State there of Florida. Live picture over Orlando, Florida. Well, as you know, one of the causes RFK Jr. has championed is to have a fresh new look at federal rules regarding fluoride in drinking water. Well, that issue has now come front and center to Florida today. Republican governor there, Ron DeSantis, signing a measure prohibiting local governments from adding fluoride to their water systems. This makes it the second state in the country after Utah to implement a statewide ban on the mineral. You're about to watch, you're about to listen to DeSantis signing that bill at a public event today in Dade City over the concerns of dentists and public health advocates. State lawmakers approved the bill last month, requiring the mineral, fluoride, and some other additives be removed from water sources across the state. Like I said, Utah was the first state to ban fluoride. They did so in late March of this year. Here's Governor DeSantis.
Well, it's great to be back in Dade City and back at Simpson Lakes. We've done things here before. I know it's a very popular spot for weddings and other types of events, and it looks really, really good. So I want to thank Commissioner Simpson for hosting us. I also want to recognize we have the President of the Florida Senate, Ben Albritton, with us today, as well as his colleagues, Senators Truenow, Hooper, and they even let in Blaise Ingoglia. So thank you, guys. We also have the president of the Florida Farm Bureau, Jeb Smith, and I want to welcome him as well. And we've got a lot of great folks that are here for the bill that we're about to sign. Most of the people in this room know how important of a role agriculture plays in Florida's economy, but also in Florida's culture, particularly from the very beginning of our state all the way through. It's been the lifeblood for so many families and for so many of our citizens. Today, we're home to over 45,000 farms and ranches. That's over 10 million acres of farmland just in the state of Florida. We have a lot of really, really significant things that are produced here. I know, as many of you know, we count for over half of fresh tomatoes, nearly 40% of all bell pepper, 42% of grapefruit, and of course, 1/3 of all oranges. I know there's been an issue. We've worked together on that for many, many years. But our floriculture sales account for 18% of the U.S. value, and that's over $1.16 billion for natural agriculture production. We have 140,000 jobs and the total agriculture production for everything is over $11 billion just here in the state of Florida. So that's a big deal. There's a lot that goes into that. We've been very helpful since my time as governor. I know when the commissioner was in the Senate, we were able to do the Right to Farm bill to update that to make sure that folks are able to earn a living and to pursue their dreams without excessive government interference. We also have done a lot to preserve farmland. We did the Rural and Family Lands Protection Program. That provided hundreds of millions of dollars for Florida's farming, forestry, and ranch land to be preserved. You know, we've done a lot apart from that too. The Florida Wildlife Corridor, we've done a lot on Everglades. You know, I'm proud that the state's growing, and there's a lot obviously to do, but we don't want the whole state to be a parking lot. We don't want the whole thing to just be cement. We want to make sure that this part of Florida is preserved. And so that's had a big deal. I know the commissioner and the cabinet has worked with me already to protect over 140,000 acres of farmland from being sold. And I think, you know, most of the time it's sold, it ends up being, you know, a housing community or something like that. And look, people want to move to Florida because so many of these other states get all this stuff wrong, that they want to be in a free state. You know, people ask me about, oh, well, you know, you guys are doing this, you're doing that. You know, how do you guys do it? And I say, well, there's a lot that goes into that. But as governor, I do have a cheat code. I can simply look to California, Illinois, New York, and then do the opposite of what they're doing. And it usually works out pretty good. So we've got a lot of people that want to come, and that's fine. But we also want to make sure that we're doing what we can to preserve an important part of Florida's heritage. You know, we even did something last year on this lab-grown meat. And, you know, people said, oh, well, let people, you know, choose to do lab-grown meat. And some people said it may not be good for you, it may not be safe, we don't know yet. But that really wasn't the reason why I signed the bill. The reason why I signed the bill is that this lab-grown meat is part of a larger agenda. People like the World Economic Forum, others, they view agriculture as the problem for global warming. They view cattle as the problem for global warming. And so it's not that they just want to give consumers a choice with this. Their goal in pursuing this is to basically drive the cattle industry out of business. And that's not going to happen today. If we had not done the bill, it wouldn't have happened today. It may not happen next week, next year, but that is the goal. So we can sit there and just act like that's not the case, or we can nip it in the bud. So we chose to just nip it in the bud. I'm not playing the games of the World Economic Forum. I want to make sure that we preserve the cattle industry, not only in the state of Florida, but throughout the entire United States of America. And that was one part of a battle that we fought that wasn't limited to agriculture, but had a huge impact. And that's this whole idea of so-called ESG, environment, social governance. We launched a frontal assault against this in Florida many years ago. See, now it's fallen out of favor. At the time, it was like the thing to do. You had these massive companies falling all over themselves to try to do ESG scores. What's this? What's that? And part of the ESG was they really wanted to kneecap the way farmers did their jobs. A lot of the things that go in to modern agriculture, they did not want to even allow that to happen. That was their ultimate vision with some of the ESG stuff. And so, it went just beyond agriculture. It went into a whole bunch of other things where big corporate financial institutions had to have like DEI policies. You had to have all this other stuff. And you know, some people said, well, ESG, it's private sector, let them do what they want. The problem is these weren't just business decisions. They were trying to change our society. They were trying to change policy, basically, without ever having to get elected to anything, without ever having to go through the process and actually do that. They just wanted to kind of collude together, asset managers, big companies, all that, and impose this worldview through the sheer force of their economic power, and that was unacceptable. So we stood up against it in our pension fund and all across all avenues that we could, when it really wasn't popular to do so, when we were going up against some pretty powerful institutions. But I can tell you today, The number one reason why you don't hear as much about ESG is because Florida was really the one responsible for killing ESG when we took our stand. In fact, the head of BlackRock was, he was kind of the visionary behind it. And then he was asked last year, whoa, ESG is kind of falling apart. So you got guys like Governor DeSantis, they've made it toxic because they're always out there come criticize. But it's true. We really led the charge on that. That had huge impact for our society, but it definitely had major, major ramifications for our agriculture community. And so I was glad to not only lead those efforts, but have a lot of support for folks in the Florida legislature at the time. And we got it right in Florida, and other states have followed. And now, under the Trump administration, people don't even talk about ESG anymore because the tide has shifted. Another thing we've led on, and some other states are following, but we need more. We also need to see the federal government do something similar, is we passed historic legislation to protect agriculture lands from the encroachment of the Chinese Communist Party. I don't want China owning farmland in the state of Florida or anywhere in the United States for that matter. It's too important to our sustainability as a people, as a country, to allow a hostile Communist Party to take control of this. And when they buy it, it's not going to say the Chinese Communist Party buys this. No, I mean, these are front groups and all this other stuff. And we've done a good job on that legislation to really police that. So we were probably the first state, on all these things, usually we're the first, but if we're not the first, it's we're second or third, and it's just because some other states have earlier legislative sessions than we do sometimes. But we were definitely leading the charge on that, and we've done that. And so that is something, and it's not just farmland, that's something that's important. It's by any land near critical infrastructure, our military bases. Why do we want the Chinese Communist Party?
Okay, so wanted to let you listen into a little bit of Governor DeSantis today as he was signing into law this bill to ban local governments in the state to put fluoride in their water systems there. So only becoming the second state to do just that.